Great. My name is Matt Beier. I am the Senior Vice President of Wisconsin Lawyers Mutual Insurance Company. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Free CLE Fridays with WILMIC. For those of you who have been here before, welcome back. And for those of you, if you're a first-time participant, this is something that WILMIC started during the pandemic as a means of reaching out and staying in touch with policyholders. These programs are free to our policyholders. The point is really to stay timely. Initially, it was very focused on, new rules related to Zoom proceedings and, different court rules and which courts were closed completely, mask requirements. You remember all of the laundry list of different things we went through during COVID. But it's evolved, and we found that policyholders really enjoyed the programs, and we did try very hard to bring, and we still do try very hard to bring current topics. And I believe that's what we have today. So we reach out to practitioners and try to understand their experience with topics like artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. I'm very excited to have Attorney Stacie Rosenzweig. She's a shareholder at Halling & Kale, and she has come across this topic quite a bit. And she's going to share her expertise with us today about what she knows about AI and ChatGPT, its uses, and perhaps just as important, what are the ethical implications of using AI and ChatGPT, and what do you as a lawyer need to be aware of or knowledgeable about to be able to best represent your clients in a competent and an appropriate way. So with that, why don't we go ahead? Oh, and then one other quick note. As I mentioned, these are free to WILMIC policyholders, and we have applied for one CLE ethics credit, and you'll find that approved in the live webinar portion of the BBE site when it is your turn to report your CLE credits. Okay, so what the heck is AI? When I hear AI, I immediately thought about Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Terminator, and thinking about the end of the world and, different ways to time travel and figure out how to beat the machines that we created. It's not there yet. But, as we'll learn, I think there are some who believe that that's maybe where it's headed. But in any event, I do have 3 definitions in the materials that you should be able to see on your screen. IBM, I think we all know who IBM is, and at its simplest form, AI is a field which combines computer science and robust data sets to enable problem solving. I think we humans are never really satisfied with ourselves, and we want to make something better. And so we think we can do that by way of machines and by way of data that we've collected over many, many years, and making that immediately accessible to something that can exercise some rationality. I think as far as its practical use, my second point there is that, it's really at the center of using technology and machines to manage our personal and professional lives. For a time, I thought it was very annoying when I would have conversations in Alexa's earshot and, about a particular product, about Nike running shoes or something like it. And suddenly, in my Facebook feed, what do you know? There's a Nike ad. I think that happens for a reason. And there are a whole bunch of calculations, listening, data collection going on in the background of things that we have adopted into our everyday life that actually make a difference. As it turns out, and as you become a little more familiar with that, I think it becomes less annoying, and you can either ignore it relatively easily, or you can make use of it. So when I know I need Nike running shoes and an ad pops up with a sale or a coupon or something, or talks about the latest model of, the Nike shoe that I like, then I think that's something that is intuitive, useful, and can be appreciated.
So I'll be interested to find out how many of you attending will now be seeing ads for Nike running shoes in your social media feeds.
Yeah, and if we could collect that data relatively easily, you're right, it would be very interesting. But ultimately, I think the third definition there is that we're teaching a machine to act like a human is probably the best way to sum it up, because I think that is what we are trying to do with artificial intelligence in many different ways. And I think it's possible, that something like the Terminator, or at least that kind of humanoid, might be down the road. But again, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about ChatGPT, how it uses artificial intelligence to affect other parts of our life, including our professional lives. And that's true for lawyers.
And I do think it's important to note, to remember, there's a lot going on around in the public about ChatGPT. That's not the only AI out there. That seems to be the most prominent, but at least so-called AI, and I don't think we're there yet. I don't think artificial intelligence is actually artificially intelligent right now. I've heard it compared to a giant black box flow chart where you put some input in and then the computer goes down the flow chart, and it's a huge flow chart. So it's a lot of data in there, but goes down the flow chart and eventually produces an answer that is in a dialogue or in a way that humans can relate to. But it's not making decisions by itself at this point. It's teaching a machine to act like a human, but it is not quite there yet. It's not a data from Star Trek positronic matrix type thing. But so when we're talking about AI, we are talking more broadly. I mean, there is some artificial intelligence that's incorporated into even Westlaw, Lexis, Bing, things like that. That operates in the background. We don't necessarily know it's there. With ChatGPT and things like that, those and somebody put in the chat that this is a language learning model, LLM. We're talking about something more proprietary, more interactive, more user focused versus in the background with something like what Lexis or Westlaw uses.
So yeah, the comment in the chat is right on. I think any role whatsoever for this kind of AI in legal work, I think, the simple answer to that is yeah, there is a role. There are many roles for ChatGPT, but that doesn't remove the responsibility for you as a lawyer to be a lawyer. And so, verifying statements that are made or that are produced by ChatGPT are things that definitely need to be checked. And I think the best illustration of that is, the subject of Stacie's ethics column, which is included in your materials. The fellow in New York who fully admitted, that he created a brief with ChatGPT that literally made up cases. And we'll talk more about that in detail. But I think, the quick answer to that question is there is a role, and we need to help you define it, and also make you heighten your awareness of what sort of ethical obligations you have as a lawyer to make use of it. So you're right. It is a language learning model. To the second point here, what is ChatGPT? And there's a pretty technical definition there. But really what it is a human being sat with a computer and gave it questions. And that computer then used whatever data it had to be able to spit out an answer. And that human continued to work with that computer to generate better and better answers. And ChatGPT is one of the final products. Now it is constantly learning based on additional feedback that it gets from its users. And so it will continue to generate answers as it's told to. And I think Stacie has some good comments on, how far can you take that? Can you tell ChatGPT to forget something? What do you think about that, Stacie?
I've tried to find out what ChatGPT actually retains and what it doesn't. I've asked ChatGPT itself, and I use it. I think it's kind of fun. I'll even sometimes use it for work, but not for anything that requires judgment or thought. I did use it once when I was having trouble explaining something in plain English that I understood very well in legalese, and it translated for me. And because I knew the legalese, I knew that the translation was correct. I was just having a bit of writer's block, and it fixed it. So I'm not a Luddite about this, but at the same time, we're not there yet. I don't know if that answers your question, Matt, or if you have something more.
No,
Yeah.
it does, and more importantly, there is one of the big concerns about Chat GPT and AI in general. And Melinda Gates just wrote, or was just interviewed by CNN, just this week, about bias in Chat GPT, and her concern being, that if there are a whole lot of men, who create this data, or who are computer scientists who teach computers how to use this data, and we don't have enough female women computer scientists. Are we missing? Is there a gap there? Is there a difference? And I think that's true. But I think the good part about Chat GPT is that it can recognize that's a problem if it's told it is, and it can learn, and it can figure out a way to help avoid that kind of bias. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. And Melinda Gates and others are right to be concerned.
Yeah,
but
in 2020 or so, Google had an earlier version of an AI. It's called the Vision AI, and this was a AI that recognized images, and it actually produced fairly racist results. I mean, you can Google this, and the Vision AI racist stuff. One of the examples given was that a dark-skinned individual was holding a thermometer gun, the type that reads your forehead, which was kind of common during 2020. It called it a gun. And the similar image with a light-skinned individual holding that thermometer called it an electronic device. And so if things like that, just little things, because, well, human beings are informing the data that goes into an AI at this point. It's, and you've heard the saying garbage in, garbage out. Human beings do have their biases. Some it's subconscious or unconscious, and some it's very overtly biased. And the machines are only as good as its input right now. And some of that with ChatGPT and others is actual human programmers that are being paid to keep it in line. I mean, ChatGPT itself has been programmed to not spit out racist or sexist or homophobic or whatever dialogue, even if you ask it. But ChatGPT isn't the only language learning model out there. It's not the only AI. And so we will have to be aware of this, and we'll have to see what happens and what people do or what these companies do going forward to keep this realistic but not harmful. Yeah.
So I think that one of the understandings that we hope you walk away with is that right now Chat GPT is entertaining just as much as it is or can be used for educational or professional purposes. When the New York Times provides chatbot prompts to try, similar to here are questions you can ask Siri or Alexa, then I think there's some fun to be had. And writing poems, solving math problems, and even writing legal briefs. It can do that. It just can't do it, as Stacie mentioned earlier, like humans currently do it. So why don't we, I think it's a good idea. I'm going to share a different screen, and I think we should go through some examples of what I've done, and then I'll give it to Stacie to see what sort of fun she can have with it. But I think it'll benefit everybody to just see it in action. So let me, Stacie, if you want to add a couple of filler comments here, I will get a new shared screen up there.
Sure. There is a comment in the chat asking about human lawyers are on a normal distribution curve, which curve has a center and left and far left. Where does AI bot fall on that normal distribution curve? That's a good question. I'm not really sure I have an answer for that. And I think, as we'll see, it tends to spit out somewhat bland responses, but it's also informed by what goes in. You'll see in your materials, the dialogue that I had, one of the questions I asked it was premised on an incorrect Supreme Court rule. I did an attorney discipline dialogue and cited a Supreme Court rule that didn't actually apply. And I guess ChatGPT wanted to like me. Yes, I'm anthropomorphizing a bit, but it wanted to like me and said, oh, well, yeah, this rule applies and here's how. And so I think it may just be something that is at this point user dependent, but I don't really have a good answer for that from Walter. Thanks.
So can you see Stacie, we have the right screen up? Does it say?
Yeah.
Okay.
It says introducing ChatGPT. So.
Okay. So this is the site. And you can sign up if you haven't already. It's really easy, not much more than an email address and a password. And I've already done that. And the next screen that you get should be this one, let's hope. But it's not very fancy. There's really not much to the screen. And you can see here that that one little pill box right in the middle of, or right at the bottom of the screen, bottom middle, is where you type your query. And it literally takes seconds to get a response. Now I've got a preloaded, when I first thought about this program, I thought, okay, well, let's see how fancy this thing is. What is it going to give me if I type in ethical concerns in Wisconsin? And it's a little slow, but let's see if it works. There we go. Give me an outline. Give me some materials that I can use to walk, to put this thing together. And it gave me a very bare bones outline. Introduction, what's the purpose? These are just common outline concepts. They're not specific information that's of any value to anybody. But it does get a little more specific and talks about attorney-client privilege, conflict of interest, not necessarily applying the use of ChatGPT to the rule, but it does give me the very basic outline. Well, can you make it better? Yeah, you can. So at the end of it, I asked the chat to add citations to the outline. Okay, so ChatGPT does that. When it talks about attorney-client privilege, it cites the correct rule. Doesn't give me much discussion or commentary, but that's where the rule can be found. So again, assuming that the person creating the outline knows, the substance of those rules, again, it's a great beginning to a jumping off point for discussion about all of these topics.
I do have to note, though, that that's not the correct citation to the rules of professional conduct. As you know, Wisconsin rules start with SCR 20 : they do by and large track the model rules of professional conduct, but they're using the model rule citation for Wisconsin, and that's just not correct.
Which is why, the very first question that we fielded, Stacie, is appropriate. Is there really any place for this in the legal world or in the practice of law? And I think there is, but you'd still have to have the training and experience to be able to recognize the point that you just made, which is that's not the correct citation. Can you refine it even more? Yeah, you bet. You can refine it even more. Include quoted text of each citation. Okay, so they still didn't correct, or I say they, ChatGPT still didn't correct the citation, but they do include, the quoted or the actual text of the rules.
And hey, it's really, really, really easy to anthropomorphize something like ChatGPT. I mean, how many of you call Siri or Alexa or your other digital, your chat assistants, you call them he or she, you don't call them it. We're already trained to do that with these corporate digital things. But we got to be careful. These aren't human beings. We will learn that. We will, when we talk about the Meta case, we will definitely talk about that. Yeah.
So I had a little more fun with this. These entries in purple are my entries, and I simply tried to, fine tune some things. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. So, Stacie has used the phrase a couple of times, we're not quite there yet. And I think that's exactly that, exactly right. And so
right. I asked mine to create a PowerPoint and it refused to do it. It does not have that capability. So we're still going to have to do that by hand for now.
Now, stay tuned, because Chris Shattuck at Practice 411 is very excited about Microsoft's Copilot product, which does promise to sort of, mesh those two worlds. And we'll have to see. I'm not sure that's available yet to the public, but he's actually demoed it and he's fairly
nice.
impressed.
Well, if that works, I'll be happy, because I am kind of allergic to PowerPoint and that'll save me the trouble. But
exactly. Now, Stacie, you can start, and this is just what I did,
okay,
prior to the program, but then you can also start a new chat.
All right. Why don't we start a new chat so you can archive that one? Why don't we ask it, I have a client that isn't paying their bills, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to terminate their services. Can ChatGPT generate a letter firing the client for non-payment of bills in accordance with Wisconsin ethical rules?
How many misspellings did I have?
Just accordance. And why don't we say I am a lawyer so that it has the context of that, because otherwise it might think you're a plumber or something. Okay, let's see what it does.
Well, should we say, yeah, Wisconsin ethics. Okay.
Yeah. No, you'll note that this is coming really, really fast. It is good like that. Again, it's citing the wrong rule of professional. All right. Once this is done, it's going too fast for me to keep up with, but also I'm looking at it. It's probably going to take about 2 pages to do. And how many of us are going to send a 2-page termination letter to a client for non-payment? Probably not. But also you can't terminate immediately if this is in litigation. You know this. The tone itself is I don't know what the tone is. I don't know how to describe this tone. It's not a tone I would use. The unpaid bills from your end have persisted and it's become increasingly difficult for me to continue representing your interests effectively. I mean, that's not bad. It's not bad. The citation is wrong. I would probably not include a citation and a copy and paste of 1.16 in here. So that's, I think, ChatGPT taking a little bit and not being a human, because we're human beings and we know how we want to be contacted and we know how we want to be talked to. And this isn't it. So, but it might be a starting point for if you're having that writer's block, if you don't know where to start, just making it spit out something like this can be helpful and can be useful, but that human touch is absolutely essential. You still need to dial it back, and because this does sound like a robot. I tend to use ChatGPT more for just ridiculous entertainment than I do for work. Matt, can you ask it? I would like to make beef stew tonight. Can it give me a recipe? But in the style of a 1980s hair metal ballad. And those of us in Gen X will probably appreciate this or not, but we'll see. Again, it does it incredibly quickly. I'm not sure I would like to cook beef stew thunder or have any idea how to make beef stew thunder after this, but it's amusing. It amuses me. So there is some value in that. This is a horribly useful procrastination device for those of you who partake. So be warned. But yeah, it's free. You can sign up. These sort of what Matt and I have both done today with the outline, with the firing letter, these are pretty benign things with ChatGPT or with similar. What happens though, what can become more problematic is if we're starting to get into specifics of our clients' matters with detail, perhaps with names. That can create some more, and I might be getting ahead of us, but that's where things get a little fishier. If we send a super awkward termination letter with a missed citation to the Supreme Court rule, but the substance of the rule is there, I don't think that's going to get anybody in trouble. I mean, I don't want to speak for the Office of Lawyer Regulation. I don't know if any of our OLR attorneys are somehow WILMIC clients. So yeah, but they're benign things. They're not going to get anybody in trouble. They can be fun, but there are some pitfalls. So I'll bounce that back to Matt and
so I'm trying to get through. We've got quite a bit of activity in the chat. Stacie, why don't I move on with my thoughts on whether ChatGPT will replace lawyers, and maybe you can take a look at those questions in the chat.
And I think as to Victor's question about whether using AI is akin at this point to be investing within Nigerian prince, I think some of our discussion will address that, and at least indirectly.
Okay, so no, ChatGPT I don't think is going to replace lawyers, and I hope that's not the goal. And so I think there are a couple of different views out there. One is as extreme as what Stephen Hawking said, and that is that continuing to develop AI will really spell the end of the human race. This is the Terminator theory, where eventually it's going to learn so much that it's going to recognize human beings as enemies. And if the goal is, or if AI decides that the goal is to replace lawyers because the chat GPT type responses are better, yeah, I think you can theorize about that, but again, as we've said so many times already, I don't think we're there yet. Another viewpoint is what's expressed by Chris Shattuck in the Wisconsin Lawyer article that I've cited in the materials, and that is that this has the potential to be a milestone for technology advancements in the legal profession, as seen with the internet, online legal research platforms, and cloud-based case management systems. To truly understand and appreciate the technology, lawyers should try it for themselves. So I think everybody that is listening to us today, and certainly those who have expressed a significant amount of skepticism in the chat, aren't wrong. I think that there is a whole lot of skepticism that needs to happen before we can understand how this is going to be useful. And more importantly, maybe, is it dangerous to use it and to rely on it in any sense in the course of providing legal services? And
I'd like to, sorry to.
No, I was just going to transition to you, Stacie. So
I would like to, just to go clarify that do not pay issue, because those of you who are not frequent and religious readers and memorizers of my blog, that's I think there was a link in there to an earlier article I wrote. Do not pay is a web service. I think it started with like a chat bot of some sort to help people do things like cancel their gym subscriptions when they were able to, or their memberships when they were able to join easily, but canceling was impossible, or their Amazon Prime or things like that. And the CEO of Do Not Pay just decided he flew a little close to the sun. He wasn't a lawyer, he was a techie, and he decided that he was going to offer some absurd sum of money to actually allow ChatGPT to represent a client in a Supreme Court argument. I am not 100% on how that tech was going to work. I believe it was like ChatGPT would listen to the argument and spit back out or a script. That was a bad idea for a whole bunch of ways, particularly considering the power that the Supreme Court has. He dialed it back a bit and said, okay, all right, we're going to allow ChatGPT to represent a defendant in a traffic ticket case. But then he got, he learned that that was probably unauthorized practice of law by a non-lawyer. Because he wasn't a lawyer, he wasn't trying to feed this to a lawyer. I don't know whether there were too many lawyers willing to risk their ticket to engage in this. So that got aborted. So that was one of the things that brought ChatGPT into the forefront for the ethics lawyer bar going, was do not pay. But that's already, do not pay has been sued and it's been very quiet. Now we're just kind of into the ChatGPT with like the Mata case and things like that.
So, I don't know yet. And I think that's what we're all trying to figure out, is exactly what the interplay is between, something like this version of AI, the Chat GPT, and a lawyer's practice. I think there are some uses that can be made that might help make the office more efficient. But, the actual lawyering, and there are several comments in here, that recognize and emphasize the human element of being a lawyer. And the benefit of having a very specific education rather than a general internet one. How many times have we been to the doctor and the doctor says, "No, don't go home and Google this. You're going to scare the crap out of yourself." The same idea. We don't necessarily want clients or others, to begin to use this in a lawyerly type way, or modeling a lawyer type behavior, writing letters like Stacie and I just created, because they're wrong. And so that part of it, definitely needs to be addressed. But I think as far as, getting past a writer's block moment, or, opening your eyes to something that maybe you weren't aware of that ChatGPT was, just to give you a new argument, I think there's great benefit in that. But again, that gets to the human creativity side of this and properly fusing that with your legal training. So I think that's a pretty good transition into competence, what it is. When WILMIC usually talks about competence, it's usually to talk about, delving into a practice area that you're not familiar with as a lawyer. We talked about that in the concept of dabbling, and I can throw statistics at you that say that those who dabble are the ones that generate the most claims, and it's true. If our lawyers identify an area of practice that makes up less than 5% of their entire practice, 40% of our claims come from an area like that, whereas a much lesser percentage come from areas of practice identified as being 75% or more. So in other words, there are reasons why lawyers, I don't want to say specialize, but that's what it is, why lawyers specialize in particular practice areas, because they become competent in it and they know what they're doing. But that's not necessarily the right approach with technology. And that's, where I throw in ABA comment 8, where you need to know the benefits and risks associated with relevant technology. It's a very general phrase. It's a very gray, reasonable phrase. And, the idea there is that you need to be aware it's out there, not just if you are a user, but also, I think you probably need to have some ability to identify when somebody else is using it. To know when you need to pour over, a brief a little more because it sounds like, ChatGPT wrote it. Not clear yet, because we haven't had that case yet, what would constitute malpractice. There's a question in the chat that says, might there come a day where a lawyer not using AI is committing malpractice? I thought the same thing about crowdsourcing, and that's really kind of what ChatGPT is. Is there a point when you've written your best brief, you've buttoned it up, you've made sure you've double checked all citations and punctuation and everything else? Do you have to take that extra step of crowdsourcing to figure out if there's a debatable concept, that's thought of a different way, or if there's a piece of authority that you just weren't aware of? I don't know. I don't think so. But I don't, and I certainly don't. I can be confident in saying that ChatGPT is not something that would rise to the level of malpractice if you don't use it. Will it ever get there? I don't know, but at least we have to be aware of it under the concept of 20:1.1 competence.
Right. And it's important to remember that the ethical considerations and malpractice considerations are a little different. We have the ethical responsibility to understand technology. That doesn't mean we need to understand it at a graduate degree level. We just need to understand what it does, and here, or at least good enough, or we can consult with people who understand this better to gain our understanding. Malpractice is falling below the standard of care, and I'll say this again, I don't think we're there yet on the standard of care, including running something like ChatGPT. Now, the standard of care may include running something that has AI in the background, like a legal research service, but it doesn't require us to interact with these things. From an ethical standpoint, it's a little different. And those of you who have heard me talk, you hear me talk about discipline being a lagging indicator. We won't know what the OLR and the Supreme Court really have to say about ChatGPT for a while, because it's something that just came on the scene very late in 2022 was when I learned about it. And I may have been around for a little while, but it didn't capture the zeitgeist, if you will, until earlier this year. And discipline takes a while to run through the system. So we won't know how the OLR is interpreting competence vis-a-vis these technologies for a long time. But right now, I would say it's not like, you remember 5 years ago, you probably didn't have an ethical obligation to understand Zoom, particularly if you didn't do video conferencing. You didn't have the obligation to know what to do immediately. Here, there are very few lawyers who don't have an ethical obligation to at least know how to connect to Zoom so they can go to court or talk with a far-flung client. And that's, COVID changed that. So things do change, but for now, I think you do have an obligation to know if you are going to use ChatGPT. You need to know its limits and its drawbacks, and you need to know what the risks are. If you don't want to use ChatGPT, you don't have to. And I think that's where we are.
And that's again, a good transition here to 20:1.3 diligence. How do you make use of it, or what do you do to be able to meet your obligations under that rule with respect to ChatGPT? And I think we do have the best example, which I again pulled from Stacie's article, or her blog entry in Ethicing, with Attorney Schwartz, who used the "just trust me" argument. Stacie, maybe you could expand on that a little bit and talk about how that's not.
All right. This is the Mata case that we've included. The docket is online on Court Listener, and you can pull a lot of these pleadings from there. But what happened with this, if you're not up on this, is that a lawyer in federal court used ChatGPT to generate a brief. He apparently, his Lexis or whatever subscription did not include federal court authority, and those things cost a lot of money, and his fast case couldn't find it, or the free resources he could find didn't find it, so he resorted to ChatGPT. And ChatGPT just flat out made up cases, complete with blue book citations, judges, everything. And he included that in the work. And then another lawyer in his office, who happened to be admitted to that court, where the lawyer Schwartz was not, the lawyer DeLuca, I believe was his name, he signed it and filed it. And so then when opposing counsel got the brief, opposing counsel read it and said, all right, we're going to look up these cases so that we can try to refute them. And they found these cases didn't exist. They brought this to the attention of the court. The court ordered the other lawyers to show cause, like, hey, where are these cases? Please append them to an affidavit or a declaration and tell us what happened. And the guy went back to ChatGPT and asked it for the cases and asked if the cases were real. And ChatGPT did spit out cases, sort of. Some of them were partial cases, or what would look like a partial opinion. Some of them looked a little full, but the formatting was weird. It's something that would send a message to somebody who does a lot of case research and briefing that this can't possibly be right. But if you don't, and you trust ChatGPT, if you thought it was like Westlaw or Lexis, and Westlaw or Lexis have spent years, decades, they've had the print volumes and they've gone to electronic. They've created a huge amount of trust that what they have there is the correct case, and these cases exist. ChatGPT isn't, but he trusted it, and it said, hey, all right, trust me. And he attached these fake cases to an affidavit saying, I checked ChatGPT and here are the cases. And then I don't remember whether it was the opposing counsel or the court was like, yeah, no, these still don't exist. And at that point, it became an order to show cause and a sanctions hearing. And they had to hire somebody in New York like me to defend them. And they had to they had to go in front of the court. And by this point, it became national news. I spent my morning of like the Saturday before Memorial Day trying to blog this to get this out because I knew it was going to go huge, and it did. The sanctions hearing was a week or two ago, and the sanctions opinion came out the last few days. These lawyers were sanctioned $5,000. They were required to send a letter to their clients and to all of the judges that were named in these fake cases as being the authors of the fake cases. They were ordered to send the fake case and the affidavit and a letter explaining what they did. They were not referred for bar discipline, nor were they told they couldn't practice before that New York federal court, nor were they told they were kicked off that case. There were no disciplinary sanctions imposed, although the New York authorities can do what they want with this. But this is a huge cautionary tale, and I think this speaks to diligence. It speaks to competence. It speaks to honesty. In fact, I mean, it sounded like these people were pretty. I'm skipping, of course.
Okay.
I mean, the blog entry was written before the sanctions hearing, and it did seem like these people were very earnestly wrong. And frankly, it is kind of better to be like, yeah, I messed up, versus, you should never, this is some unsolicited advice here. If you are responding to a court telling you, demanding that you explain what happened, saying that you screwed up because you're incompetent is going to go over better than saying you lied, or than just lying again. But nonetheless, none of this is, yeah, so it does implicate a lot of potential problems, but and I'm not a Luddite by any stretch. I like technology, but I'm also, like, for a lawyer, I am not super risk taking. I am a bit risk adverse, and this is where I land on that.
So, yeah, and the rules that identify candor, at least, the ones that I've identified are 3.3 candor toward the tribunal. Again, the case that you just described, Stacie, is an exact example of that. Truthfulness in statements to others, same thing. And then just general misconduct. It sounds like they made some conclusions in that sanctions hearing about those concepts, that, maybe there wasn't intentional misrepresentation, but there certainly was misrepresentation of cases that didn't exist, and others. So all things to be aware of, especially when you go back to the general concept of competency. You need to be aware of the risks of using ChatGPT. Thank you to Attorney Schwartz for demonstrating exactly what several of those risks are.
Right. He was, nobody ever wants to be my test case on emerging technologies, and I don't blame them. This guy didn't want to be my friends Tyler and Ron's test case, but here we are. It is a cautionary tale to the rest of us. One thing I did find interesting about the sanctions opinion is the idea that the harsher sanctions were not awarded or ordered because these guys had suffered enough. The publicity was awful. It is going to damage their reputation, probably damage their business for a while. So take that for what it's worth. Yeah, there are non-ethical consequences as well. There are reputational consequences. My guess is that the next ChatGPT screw up is not going to be quite as in the public eye as this one, because the first is always the one that's the loudest, or the first one to be publicized a little becomes publicized a lot. But there are going to be more, just because it is an emerging technology. There were plenty of problems with email when that first came out. There's still the problems with the reply versus the reply all, the autofill of you have your client John Smith and you accidentally send it to Jane Smithson. There's that. So it'll, but like I said, it'll take a while for us to figure out how this is going to all shake out.
Yeah, and I guess just to follow up that last point, and that is that there is this concern under 20:2.1 where as a lawyer you are an advisor and you need to exercise independent professional judgment. And if you're relying so much on ChatGPT to come up with responses, are you actually exercising any sort of independent judgment, I think is the question. And our good friend Aviva Kaiser has the quote, ChatGPT acknowledges that there is the potential for it to be used in decision-making systems. That makes sense to me, that you can't ever, and I think every lawyer that is on this program right now walked in with that understanding, like, hey, I still have to be a lawyer. I still have to exercise my best judgment and advise my clients as I best see fit. And so, that is definitely one of the ethical concerns that you can't lose, and you can't rely on ChatGPT to make your decisions for you.
And in this way, it's almost similar to using an Excel spreadsheet to come up with a settlement value for like a personal injury or a tort claim, where you plug in the probabilities of certain things happen and the dollar value attached to those probabilities, and it does its magic in the spreadsheet and spits out a range or a number as to say, this is what we should settle for. Some of the, the inputs of there depend on your professional judgment. Well-instructed jury in Milwaukee County might do this versus a well-instructed jury in Vilas County may do something very different. You're using that experience, input from others. And then when it comes out, you still need to use your judgment. Well, okay, this has a settlement value of $2.5 million, but my client is broke, so that doesn't help anything. You still need to, the human element, it does need to be there.
And Aviva, also talked about 20:5.3 in her article, and responsibilities regarding non-lawyer assistants. I had some trouble just because I still, you heard me before when I was using Chat GPT. I used pronouns that usually refer to a person, he, she, or they, and not it. But in this rule, really, when I first read it, it spoke to me as, you need to supervise the rest of the folks in your office. But I guess that can include Chat GPT or other things like it.
Grammatically, 25.3 says non-lawyer assistants and not lawyer assistants, like
Gotcha.
ASS, IST, ANCE, that if it was assistants human, that might, or assist ASS, IST, ANTS, I guess I'm pronouncing them fairly similarly, but ANTS suggests an actual human being assistant, although we hear about, the early like Palm Pilots were called personal digital assistants. Here, non-lawyer assistants can come from anything. So I would say that at least arguably, again, lagging indicator, we won't know. SCR 25.3 could make that argument.
And I think what the idea there, at least the way Aviva really drove this home, was to suggest that you need to put policies and procedures in place so that your office knows, how we're going to make use, or if we're going to make use of artificial intelligence and Chat GPT. What do you think about that, Stacie? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think that makes perfect sense. That there have to be some parameters. There's got to be some guide rails on advising an associate or a legal assistant or a paralegal on how to use this technology, and certainly for yourself as the managing partner in the firm.
Well, there's the responsibilities regarding supervising of a subordinate lawyer, of a new lawyer, of anybody under your supervision. Those responsibilities exist, AI or not. And if you're, you as a senior lawyer, you have responsibility for ensuring those working under you are abiding by their ethical requirements. You take that responsibility. So having a policy about the use of technology, most firms that are more than a couple of people have some sort of technology use policy. It might be a social media policy. You have all sorts of policies, what you can, whether you can microwave fish in the break room oven, stuff like that. So you've got, this might be one of them. This might, particularly, if you have entrepreneurial type people working for you that might take some risks and take some, I found this great new tech, let's try it. You may want to have those guardrails sooner rather than later. If you have people working with you who are more, this is just how we do it and I'm not going to change, you probably still want those guardrails, but it may not have the urgency that, having the new associate with who attended a different CLE on ChatGPT that was a little more excited about it, trying to use it. So yeah, no, I agree. I do agree that this does fall under a supervising responsibility, just as it would any other technology.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to get back to one of the questions that was raised earlier. The threshold question is where is Chat GPT getting its content? And is that getting an infringement of copyright, plagiarism, no attribution? Is that, is the sourcing accurate? I think the questions go hand in hand. And that probably has to be part of your policy, so that if you are using it, you're making sure, or you're taking steps, additional steps to be sure that you aren't running afoul of, something that is copywritten or otherwise protected. And I think that answers that question, but maybe I'm off the mark, Stacie. What do you think?
Well, I think so, but AI is beyond. There is other AI other than the generative text type. Earlier this year or last year, I started playing with DALL-E, which is an AI that generates images in response to prompts. And again, I didn't do anything with this that was, show me panda bears sitting on the Supreme Court, silly stuff like that. But there is some thought that that particular tool scrapes the internet, pulls up images, and then sort of repackages and repurposes them for other things. And some of the artists whose images have been scraped have found their watermarks in weird places on AI generated images, and that has not gone over well. I am not an IP expert. I'm not a copyright expert. I don't know what that means in the legalistic sense, but in the infringing on the artist's creative work, it's not a good look. One issue though is also where this information comes from. So far, things like ChatGPT are just what you put into it from what you affirmatively type. I wonder though, the AIs that are run by the legal research companies, that the Microsoft one that's being introduced, are they going to start scraping from your data? From, because there are already ones where you can upload a brief and have the brief check the cites and check the grammar and things like that. Those are built into the legal research stuff. So what's that mean? For now, it's kind of keeping it, or at least it was my understanding. I never really used the brief editor tools, but it was my understanding it kind of kept it within your universe. But what happens if it starts using it to improve the AI itself? Is it taking, if you represent that Jennifer Smith in a car accident case, is Jennifer Smith's car accident confidential information related to representation going to become part of this? So if you are going to start using AI tools that do take confidential information, or you're adding enough to ChatGPT that a person on the street could read it and recognize what you're talking about, you may need to start talking about getting consent from your clients. Because you are allowed to reveal confidences when you have informed consent, or when you're impliedly authorized to do so in order to effectuate representation. Maybe research, you do have some implied authorization, but at the same time, I don't know any client was like, okay, sure, you're implied to use Westlaw to research my case, but you're not authorized to put my data into the cloud and have Microsoft or OpenAI or whatever spit it back out in whatever form. So there's a caution there. I don't like to get into slippery slope too much, except I do. And here we are. It's kind of like it's a bunch of what ifs. We don't have all the answers. You folks have a lot of questions that we probably can't answer at this point, but that also speaks to the idea that this is an emerging technology, and you need to tread carefully when you do use it.
Yeah. So if I can, are you suggesting, Stacie, that when you type in your chat, you type in your query into ChatGPT, and it doesn't in and of itself reveal anything about any particular client that you're representing? Is there a possibility? Can you upload more information than that?
I mean, yeah, right now, it only takes what you put into it.
Okay.
You could theoretically, I guess, copy and paste a brief into it and ask it for its feedback. I don't know. I've never tried that. I don't know how well it works. So right now, yeah, right. And right now, I did ask when I was doing that exercise, when I was asking, I did a similar exercise to you, asking ChatGPT about itself, and I asked it, like, so what do you do with data? And it says I don't do anything with data, or I don't retain it. I'm just a language model. But I don't know that that's correct, and I don't know that the ChatGPT may not retain it, but something else behind the scenes does. I don't know. I don't feel uncomfortable asking it, so what are the elements, I have a car accident case, what are the elements of a negligence tort? I don't have a problem with you asking that, again, with the caveat that we hope it's right. From a confidentiality standpoint, I don't mind, but the closer you get to details concerning representation, and remember, SCR 21.6, confidentiality, is broader than the attorney-client privilege. Attorney-client privilege is evidentiary in court, in depositions, things like that. Confidentiality is everywhere, and it's everything. It's not just communications documents, it's information relating to the representation of a client, and end of clause. And my client is 32 years old, 5'6", 140 pounds, and had that's information relating to representation of the client. The line obviously is going to be more the more detail you go into, the harder it is to see where the line is. So again, you are allowed to ask hypotheticals, when you're asking for somebody's view on something or trying to work through a problem. It's not a violation of confidentiality to ask a hypothetical, so long as nobody's details are recognizable in that. And so that's kind of what we're doing here with ChatGPT for now. But
yeah, and every comment we utter, Stacie, generates several more questions, and there are even more in the chat now. Like, what if the client is using ChatGPT? So I think the only suggestion I have there is that when you take on the representation, that similar to, the advice, don't use social media, about anything related to this case. It's probably equally important to say, don't go out there, because I can see, that there would be discovery requests for every single chat GPT you've, entered, in the last, 30 days or whatever it is.
You are using this keyword or whatever.
Yep.
And so in the chat, would such a disclosure by a client to an AI bot defeat a claim of privilege or work product protection? That is, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. It's not, I don't think anybody's ever tried to say somebody Googling their problem creates an attorney-client privilege issue because Google spits out ads that are related to the keywords that you're entering. Like many of my clients will find me, I work with nurses, and a lot of nurses are Googlers. They will Google nurse license, lawyer, help, stuff like that. And sometimes they will put in the specifics of their query, because we know what Google says the keywords were, and sometimes it is things like, and I'm making this up, but it's along these lines, diversion, drugs, Pixis, need lawyer, help. There is a lot of help in there. I don't think anybody says that violates the attorney-client privilege yet.
Yeah.
Again, please, I don't need a test case on that, but an AI bot, an AI bot is different, or at least it holds itself out as different. It's not Google. It's supposed to be learning. So that's an unanswered question, at least from my perspective. I would say no-ish now, but I wouldn't necessarily want to rely on that.
Right. Folks, we've reached the end of our hour. It's 2 minutes here before 1 o'clock. This has been a very good discussion. I've appreciated it. I hope you have too. I want to give the last minute to Stacie to say whatever parting shot she thinks is most relevant, or whatever message she wants you all to receive here before we part ways and have a good holiday weekend. But I want to take just a real quick second to say thank you very much for attending, and please let us know. If you want more topics like this, we can bring Stacie back. We can have even more panelists and get different perspectives, or we can address something completely different. So your feedback is what drives our topic choice. So with that, thank you again, and Stacie, thank you so much for your time to this, and whatever parting shot you want to make. The floor, the Zoom.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you for inviting me to talk, and thank you everybody for attending. I don't want to make anybody scared of technology. That's not my goal here. Technology, we all live it. We all live it to a certain extent. I mean, think about it. We have in our hands a device that we maybe pay $30 a month for, maybe more, I don't know. And this device is capable of accessing the whole of human knowledge and ChatGPT as well. I mean, we shouldn't be scared of these things, but we do need to go in with eyes wide open, and we may need to, and perhaps not gung-ho immediately. And that's true of not just ChatGPT and AI, but any emerging technology, particularly when it's advertised as this is going to disrupt the entire industry. It's going to put you out of business or make your job so much easier. You're going to make $1 million a week on this. Any of those representations, we should, put our critical hats on and you have some fun with it. Ask it for beef stew recipes. Maybe it'll produce one that's actually cookable. But other than that, I thank you again very much for giving up a part of your clearing up air, yay, Friday afternoon to this. And I'll see you. I'm happy to come back for the next one. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Have a good, safe holiday weekend.